The Galactic Academy's main lecture hall buzzed with the usual mix of excitement and nervous energy that came with Advanced Warfare Tactics class. Students from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their various appendages taking notes on quantum tablets or neural interfaces. The massive holographic display at the front showed rotating images of weapons from across known space, plasma rifles from the Zephyrian Empire, sonic disruptors favored by the Crystal and Vorthan, and the dreaded molecular scramblers used by the Insectoid Hive Collective. Professor Zenthara, a tall and imposing Eltarian with silver-scaled skin and forearms, gestured toward the display with two of her limbs while the other two manipulated the holographic controls. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had seen real combat across 3 star systems.
Today we examine the evolution of ranged weaponry, she announced, her translator color rendering her clicks and whistles into perfect galactic standard.
Each civilization develops tools of war based on their physiology, available materials, and tactical doctrine.
The question before us is simple: what makes a weapon effective?
A student from the amphibious Aquari raised a webbed hand.
Professor, surely it's about energy output and targeting systems?
A common assumption, Zenthara replied, manipulating the display to show power readings. The Nexus Empire's quantum cannons can level mountains. Yet they lost the border wars to enemies using primitive kinetic weapons.
Why? The classroom fell silent as students pondered this.
In the third row, Marcuschan sat quietly, his unremarkable human appearance making him nearly invisible among his more exotic classmates. Humans were still newcomers to galactic society, having only made contact 15 years ago. Most species viewed them as curiosities, bipedal mammals from a backwater world who somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel through what the scientific community called inexplicably crude engineering.
Perhaps, suggested a mantis like Kytherian, the primitive weapons were more reliable?
Closer, Zenthara acknowledged. But, you're still thinking in terms of technology levels.
The real answer lies in adaptability. The Nexus forces relied entirely on their quantum cannons. When those weapons failed in the electromagnetic storms of the Spiral Nebula, they had no backup.
Their enemies, however, carried multiple weapon types and could adjust their tactics. She paused, fixing her 4 eyes on different sections of the classroom.
Which brings us to today's practical exercise. I want each of you to demonstrate a weapon system from your homeworld. Not just describe it, actually show how it works. You have 1 hour to gather materials from around the academy and construct something functional. The room erupted in chatter as students began planning. The Vorthan immediately headed for the chemistry lab, no doubt intending to create their signature crystalline projectiles. Several Zephyrians made for the engineering wing where they could access plasma conduits. The Hive Collective representatives began coordinating in their rapid click language, their natural teamwork giving them a significant advantage. Marcus remained seated, watching the exodus with calm eyes. He had grown up on New Montana, one of humanity's frontier colonies where imported technology was expensive and, often unreliable. His grandfather had taught him that the best tools were the ones you could make yourself, maintain yourself, and understand completely. While his classmates ran toward the high-tech labs, Marcus looked around the lecture hall itself. Human student, Professor Zenthara's voice cut through his thoughts. Are you not participating?
Marcus stood slowly, drawing attention from the few remaining students.
I am, Professor. Just getting my bearings. Your species is known for projectile weapons, correct? Chemically propelled metal slugs? Among other things, Marcus replied diplomatically. He had learned not to elaborate too much on human military history. Most galactic species found it disturbing how many different ways humans had devised to kill each other throughout their evolution. The Eltarian's head tilted in what Marcus had learned was their expression of curiosity. The Academy's fabrication labs can produce chemical propellants. Though I warn you, projectile weapons rarely impress in a class that has seen plasma and molecular disintegration. Understood, Professor. I'll keep that in mind. As the last of his classmates filed out toward the various technical labs, Marcus began examining his immediate surroundings. The lecture hall was a marvel of galactic engineering, built to accommodate dozens of different species with varying environmental needs. The seats were made from a flexible polymer that could adjust to any body type. Support struts throughout the room were constructed from lightweight but incredibly strong composite materials. Even the simple items scattered around told a story of advanced materials science. Marcus picked up a discarded stylus from the floor.
The writing implement was made from the same composite material as the support struts, light, strong, and with just enough flexibility to prevent breaking under stress.
Perfect.
He collected several more abandoned styluses, noting their length and thickness. Next, he examined the seats themselves. The polymer was remarkable, tough enough to support a 2-ton Gravian but flexible enough for comfort.
More importantly, it was elastic.
Marcus pulled at a loose edge where someone had apparently been picking at their chair. The material stretched significantly before snapping back to its original shape. Working methodically, Marcus gathered his materials. Styluses for the main structure. Strips of polymer from damaged chair edges. There were always a few chairs showing wear from students' nervous habits. Finally, he found what he was looking for in the classroom's emergency supply kit, a spool of high-tensile cord designed for emergency restraints and repairs.
The emergency kit also yielded other useful items. A small cutting tool for freeing trapped individuals.
A tube of universal adhesive that could bond virtually any materials. Even a few emergency food packets, though Marcus wasn't sure yet how those might be useful. As he worked, Marcus reflected on the challenge Professor Zenthara had posed. She wasn't really asking for the most advanced weapon, she wanted to see how each student approached the problem of creating something effective from available resources. The other students were leveraging their access to high-tech labs, but they were also limiting themselves to familiar solutions. Humans, Marcus had learned, approached problems differently than most galactic species. Where others saw the need for specialized equipment, humans saw the potential in whatever was at hand. It was a perspective born from millions of years of evolution on a world where survival often meant making do with whatever nature provided. The composite styluses were about 30 inches long and perfectly straight. Marcus carefully split one end of each stylus lengthwise, creating a notch just deep enough to hold his projectiles. The material was tough enough that he needed to use the emergency cutting tool, but, once notched, the styluses would serve his purpose perfectly. The real innovation came in combining the materials. Marcus had noticed that the emergency cord wasn't just strong, it was designed to stretch slightly under load before returning to its original length. Combined with the elastic properties of the polymer strips, he could create a power storage and release system that would be both efficient and reliable. Working with practiced hands, Marcus began assembly. He had made his first bow at age 8 under his grandfather's guidance, using a piece of greenwood and a string made from plant fibers. The principles hadn't changed, even if the materials were now products of advanced galactic technology. The polymer strips, when properly layered and bonded with the universal adhesive, created limbs that could bend significantly while storing tremendous energy. The composite styluses provided a rigid handle section while their notched ends would guide his projectiles. The emergency cord, when properly tensioned, completed the system. As Marcus worked, other students began returning to the lecture hall with their creations. The Vorthan had indeed created a crystal and projectile launcher, powered by a portable energy cell they had requisitioned from the engineering lab. It was undeniably impressive, with targeting lasers and automatic loading mechanisms. The Zephyrian team had constructed something that looked more like a small artillery piece, complete with plasma containment fields and gravimetric targeting systems. It hummed with barely contained energy and required 3 students to operate safely. Even the usually peaceful Aquari had created something formidable, a sonic weapon that could supposedly shatter stone by finding and exploiting resonant frequencies. The mathematics alone were beyond most of the other students. Professor Zenthara observed each demonstration with professional interest, making notes on her quantum tablet. The weapons were indeed impressive examples of their creators' technological capabilities and cultural approaches to warfare. The Hive Collective's coordinated projectile system could lay down devastating fields of fire through perfect synchronization. The crystalline Vorthan's weapon could punch through heavy armor with surgical precision. Fascinating diversity, the professor commented as the demonstrations concluded. Each weapon reflects its creator's mindset and available technology base. Overwhelming firepower, precision strikes, area denial, coordinated assault, all valid tactical approaches. She turned to Marcus, who stood quietly beside what appeared to be little more than curved sticks held together with string. Several students snickered at the crude appearance of his construction. "Human student, please present your weapon system." Marcus stepped forward, holding his creation with obvious familiarity. "This is a composite recurve bow, Professor. Effective range of approximately 100 yards, with accuracy limited primarily by the skill of the operator rather than the weapon itself.
the snickers grew louder. One of the Zephyrians called out, "That's not even technological. It's just bent sticks." Marcus smiled slightly. That's exactly the point.
This weapon requires no external power source, no ammunition supply lines, no maintenance beyond basic string replacement. It can be constructed from materials available in virtually any environment, and it's completely silent in operation. Professor Zenthara's four eyes focused intently on the human and his primitive-looking weapon.
Demonstrate its capabilities. I'll need projectiles, Marcus said, walking to the front of the lecture hall. He began collecting more styluses from the floor and nearby desks.
Using his cutting tool, he quickly fashioned several straight shafts, each about 18 inches long. The classroom had grown quiet as students realized Marcus was completely serious about his crude weapon. Even the Vorthan had set aside their targeting computers to watch.
Marcus knocked one of his improvised arrows and drew the bowstring back smoothly.
The weapon bent dramatically, the composite limbs storing energy with visible tension. He aimed at a target panel at the far end of the lecture hall, designed to display holographic tactical scenarios. The release was nearly silent, just a soft thrum as the string snapped forward. The improvised arrow flew straight and true, striking the target panel with enough force to embed itself in the surface. The impact created a visible crack in what everyone knew was military-grade armor plating. The lecture hall fell completely silent. Professor Zenthara approached the target, examining the embedded projectile with professional interest.
Impressive penetration. And you constructed this entire system from classroom materials in under an hour?
Yes, Professor. With more time and better materials, I could improve both range and accuracy significantly. But why choose such a primitive approach? Asked the Aquari student who had created the sonic weapon.
Surely your people have developed more advanced projectile systems? Marcus nodded.
We have. Railguns, plasma rifles, particle beam weapons. Humanity has developed most of the same technologies as other galactic civilizations.
But we've also kept the older methods. Why? Professor Zenthara's question carried genuine scientific curiosity.
Because the fundamental principles never change, Marcus replied, retrieving his arrow from the target. Energy storage, efficient transfer, accurate delivery. Whether you're using electromagnetics, plasma containment, or bent sticks, you're solving the same basic physics problems. The advantage of primitive methods is that they work when everything else fails. He gestured toward the impressive weapons his classmates had created. Every advanced weapon in this room depends on infrastructure, power grids, ammunition factories, specialized maintenance.
This bow will function as long as I can find materials to make strings and projectiles. On New Montana, we call it appropriate technology. The Hive Collective representative clicked rapidly, their translator rendering it as, but surely efficiency favors advanced systems? Does it? Marcus asked. How long did it take your team to coordinate the construction of your weapon system? How much specialized equipment did you need?
My bow took 45 minutes and used materials scattered around this classroom.
Professor Zenthara made several notes on her tablet. An interesting perspective. You're suggesting that simplicity itself is a tactical advantage?
I'm suggesting that the best weapon is the one that's available when you need it, Marcus corrected.
Complex systems have more failure points. Simple systems are more adaptable.
To demonstrate, Marcus quickly modified his bow by adjusting the string tension and adding additional polymer strips to the limbs. The weapon's characteristics changed noticeably, trading raw power for increased rate of fire. Then, he reversed the modifications, showing how quickly the system could be reconfigured for different tactical requirements. Adaptability, he repeated, echoing Professor Zenthara's earlier lesson about the border wars. When you understand the principles, you can modify your approach to fit the situation. The professor's expression was unreadable, but Marcus caught the subtle signs of approval, the slight forward lean, the way her four eyes remained focused on him rather than his weapon. In Altarian body language, these indicated respect for a worthy opponent.
Class dismissed, she announced suddenly. I want detailed reports on today's demonstrations by next session. Focus on the relationship between technological complexity and tactical effectiveness.
As students began filing out, chattering about the day's demonstrations, Professor Zenthara approached Marcus directly.
Human student, remain behind.
I wish to discuss your demonstration further. Marcus gathered his materials while his classmates left, some still glancing back at his simple weapon with newfound respect. The Zephyrians were engaged in heated discussion about resource efficiency, while the Vorthan had begun examining their own weapon with critical eyes.
"Professor?"
Marcus said when they were alone.
"Your approach was unexpected," she began, her translator rendering subtle tonal variations that indicated thoughtfulness. "Most students showcased their species' technological achievements. You demonstrated philosophical principles."
"I demonstrated what works, Professor."
"Indeed.
But there's more to your choice than mere practicality."
Her four eyes studied him intently.
"You could have accessed the fabrication labs like your classmates.
You chose not to. Why?"
Marcus considered his answer carefully. Professor Zenthara was known for her tactical brilliance, and her questions were never simple requests for information.
"Because the exercise wasn't really about building weapons," he said finally. "It was about revealing how we think about problems."
One of her arms gestured approvingly.
"Elaborate." "My classmates saw the challenge as an opportunity to showcase their technological capabilities.
They went to specialized labs because they were thinking about impressing you with advanced systems. But the real lesson was in your opening lecture about adaptability and backup systems."
"And your conclusion?" Marcus held up his bow. "This isn't impressive because it's primitive. It's impressive because it's universal. Give me an hour in any environment with basic materials, and I can create something similar."
The Vorthan's crystalline launcher is more powerful, but it requires specific crystal matrices and energy sources. The Zephyrian plasma system needs electromagnetically contained fields and cooling systems, while your weapon needs only elastic materials and projectiles.
Exactly.
It scales down to individual survival and scales up to equipped armies.
It works in electromagnetic storms that would disable plasma weapons.
It functions in low-tech environments where energy weapons can't be maintained.
Professor Zenthara made additional notes, her movements suggesting deep thought. "You speak of human military philosophy. In part. But it's really about human adaptability in general.
We're not the strongest species or the smartest. We don't have natural armor or built-in weapons.
Our advantage has always been making tools and adapting to circumstances." "Show me," she said suddenly. "Professor? Modify your weapon for a different tactical scenario. Assume you need to disable rather than penetrate. Show me this adaptability."
Marcus smiled and got to work. Using the universal adhesive, he created blunt arrowheads from polymer strips, designed to spread impact force rather than concentrate it. He adjusted the bow's pull weight by shortening the string slightly, reducing velocity but increasing accuracy for precision shots.
"Less lethal projectiles," he explained as he worked.
"Lower velocity means less penetration but more impact energy transfer.
Perfect for disabling equipment or non-lethal takedowns." "And if the tactical situation changed again?"
"Different arrowheads, different string configurations, different shooting techniques.
The basic system remains the same, but its application adapts to requirements."
The professor's four eyes remained fixed on his modifications.
"How long to train someone to use this effectively?" "Basic accuracy?"
"A few hours of practice."
"Combat effectiveness?" "Depends on the individual, but much faster than plasma weapons training."
"The motor skills are intuitive, most species have some equivalent of throwing or launching motions.
While plasma weapons require understanding of electromagnetic theory and safety protocols." "Among other things, yes."
Professor Zenthara set down her tablet and fixed Marcus with what he had learned was her most serious expression.
"Human student, you've given me much to consider.
Your species' approach to warfare is unusual by galactic standards."
"How so, Professor?" "Most civilizations develop along predictable paths.
They discover energy manipulation, electromagnetic principles, advanced materials science. Their weapons become more sophisticated, more powerful, more specialized. But humans seem to have developed advanced technology while retaining primitive methods."
Marcus nodded. "We call it redundancy.
Our military doctrine emphasizes backup systems and alternative approaches. If your primary weapon fails, you need secondary options. If those fail, you need to be able to improvise from whatever's available."
A philosophy born from a dangerous homeworld? Earth has its challenges, but I think it's more about our evolution.
Humans spent millions of years as prey animals who became predators through tool use and adaptation.
We never lost the mindset that survival depends on flexibility.
The professor's gesture indicated understanding, though Marcus suspected she found human psychology as alien as most species did. Humans were unusual in maintaining what others saw as primitive survival instincts despite achieving advanced technology. "I'm recommending you for advanced tactical studies," she said finally. "Your perspective would benefit our military theory courses."
Thank you, Professor. But I should mention that human military history is extensive. Some aspects might be disturbing to other species. Elaborate.
Marcus chose his words carefully.
Humans have been refining warfare for our entire recorded history.
We've had thousands of years to develop tactics, strategies, and weapons specifically designed to fight other humans. Most galactic species achieved spaceflight without that level of military development.
You're suggesting humans are natural warriors?
I'm suggesting humans are natural survivors, and warfare is just one application of survival skills.
We adapt to threats, we innovate solutions, and we don't give up easily.
Professor Zenthara made final notes on her tablet, then looked directly at Marcus.
One last question, human student. In a real combat situation, would you choose your primitive bow over advanced galactic weapons?
Marcus smiled, thinking of his grandfather's lessons about the right tool for the job. "I'd choose whatever gives me the best chance of completing my mission and surviving. Sometimes that's advanced technology. Sometimes it's a bent stick and string. The trick is knowing when to use which."
And how does one develop such judgment?
Practice, Professor.
Lots of practice.
3 days after the weapons demonstration, Marcus found himself walking through the Galactic Academy's expansive central plaza alongside Zexhai, his Zephyrian study partner. The plaza served as a neutral meeting ground for the dozens of species attending the academy, with environmental controls that could accommodate everything from the methane-breathing Boltar to the high-gravity Gravians. "I still don't understand your approach," Zexhai said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones common to her species. "Your primitive weapon caused quite a discussion in our dormitory." Marcus adjusted his pace to match her shorter stride. Zephyrians were bipedal like humans but stood only 4 feet tall, with dense bone structure adapted to their high-gravity homeworld.
What kind of discussion? Some think you deliberately chose inferior technology to make a philosophical point. Others believe humans simply lack the scientific knowledge to create proper weapons.
Zexhai's crest feathers rippled with what Marcus had learned indicated uncertainty. "I argued that you could have used the fabrication labs if you wanted to."
You'd be correct. Human technology isn't that far behind galactic standards in most areas.
They passed a group of Aquari students conducting what appeared to be a musical performance, their harmonic vocalizations creating complex mathematical patterns in the air. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, but Marcus had learned it was actually an advanced form of acoustic engineering. The Aquari used similar principles for their sonic weapons.
Then, why choose such a basic approach? Zexhai persisted.
"Your bow was effective, certainly, but my plasma rifle has superior range, accuracy, and stopping power." Marcus stopped at one of the plaza's numerous information kiosks, ostensibly checking his class schedule but actually buying time to consider his answer. The kiosk's display automatically adjusted to human vision parameters, showing data in familiar formats and colors.
"Can you build your plasma rifle from scratch?" he asked finally.
Zexhai's crest feathers flattened slightly.
"Build it? Why would I need to build it?"
Proper plasma rifles are manufactured in dedicated facilities with precision equipment and quality control.
But could you, if you had to? If you were stranded somewhere without access to manufacturing facilities? I suppose I understand the theoretical principles. Plasma containment requires electromagnetic field generators, which need specific crystalline matrices for proper resonance.
The power coupling systems require precisely wound induction coils. She paused, her feathers rising as she realized the implications.
The materials alone would require industrial fabrication processes.
Whereas I can make a functional bow from materials found in virtually any environment with sufficient plant or synthetic polymers. They resumed walking, passing the Academy's impressive memorial garden where crystalline monuments honored graduates who had died in various conflicts across the galaxy.
Each memorial told a story of species cooperation, technological achievement, or heroic sacrifice. But, surely that's an edge case, Zexai argued.
Modern military forces don't operate without supply lines and manufacturing support. Marcus thought of the human military histories he had studied, filled with accounts of units cut off from supply lines who continued fighting with improvised weapons and captured equipment. Edge cases have a way of becoming critical when you least expect them. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the Academy's main administrative building. A crowd had gathered around what appeared to be an emergency response team treating an injured student. Marcus could see the distinctive purple skin and multiple arms of a Nexarian, one of the species known for their advanced technological integration.
What happened? Zexai asked a nearby Vorthan student whose crystalline form reflected the morning light in rainbow patterns.
Equipment malfunction, the Vorthan replied, their voice carrying the resonant tones of living crystal. The Nexarian student's cybernetic implants suffered some kind of cascade failure. The medical team is trying to isolate the damaged systems. Marcus watched as the medical technicians, themselves from multiple species, worked with sophisticated scanning equipment to diagnose the problem. The injured Nexarian writhed in apparent pain, their natural and artificial systems clearly in conflict. "This is precisely what I mean," Marcus said quietly to Zexai.
"Advanced technology creates new vulnerabilities."
"That's hardly a fair comparison," she protested.
"Cybernetic implants are optional enhancements, not weapons systems." "Are they?" "I know Nexarian culture considers cybernetic integration essential for full participation in their society." "Can you really call something optional when your entire civilization depends on it?"
They watched as the medical team finally stabilized the injured student, who was carefully transported to the Academy's advanced medical facility. The crowd began to disperse, but Marcus noticed several Nexarian students looking visibly shaken by the incident. "The point isn't that technology is bad," Marcus continued as they walked toward their next class. "The point is that every technological solution creates new dependencies and new failure modes.
The more complex the system, the more ways it can go wrong." Zexai's feathers rippled thoughtfully. "Yet complex systems also provide capabilities that simple systems cannot match. My plasma rifle can engage targets at ranges where your bow would be completely ineffective." "Absolutely true. I'm not arguing against advanced technology, I'm arguing for understanding its limitations." They entered the Academy's science wing, where Professor Veltar's xenobiology class was held. The corridors here were lined with displays showing the incredible diversity of life forms discovered across the galaxy. Some specimens were so alien that viewing them required special equipment just to perceive their existence.
"Consider this," Marcus said as they took their seats in the lecture hall.
"Your plasma rifle is superior to my bow in almost every measurable way. But, what happens if you're fighting in an environment with strong electromagnetic fields?"
"The containment systems would be affected," Zexai admitted.
"Plasma weapons require stable EM fields for proper operation. What about extreme temperatures? Cold environments would affect the power cell efficiency. Extreme heat could cause thermal runaway in the charging systems. High radiation? The control electronics would be vulnerable to ionizing radiation, certainly." Marcus nodded.
"And, in any of those situations, my bow would continue functioning normally."
"That's not because it's superior technology, it's because it's appropriate technology for those specific circumstances."
Professor Veltar entered the classroom, her six-legged arthropod form clicking across the floor with precise movements. Like all arthropods, she possessed a natural understanding of structural engineering that made their species invaluable in construction and mechanical design. "Today we examine adaptive physiology," she announced without preamble, her mandibles clicking as the translation device rendered her speech. "Specifically, how different species have evolved solutions to common environmental challenges." The holographic display activated, showing various alien species in their native environments. Each had developed unique solutions to problems like extreme temperatures, low oxygen, high radiation, or unusual gravity. "Note the diversity of approaches," Professor Veltar continued. "The ice world glacians developed internal heating mechanisms. Desert world iridians evolved water conservation systems. High radiation worlds produced species with natural electromagnetic shielding." Marcus found himself thinking about the parallels between biological adaptation and technological development. Each species had indeed found different solutions to similar problems, just as they had developed different weapons technologies. Human student, Professor Veltar's attention focused on him suddenly.
Your species comes from what is classified as a high-stress environment, correct?
Earth has its challenges, Marcus replied carefully. Variable climate, natural disasters, predator species, disease vectors. But, I wouldn't call it unusually dangerous compared to some worlds. Yet humans exhibit unusually high stress adaptation compared to most sapient species.
Multiple redundant organ systems, rapid healing, extensive immune responses, high endurance capacity.
Her mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Most interesting is your species' retention of primitive survival instincts despite technological advancement.
Zexhai leaned forward in her seat. Professor, what exactly do you mean by primitive survival instincts?
Observe, Professor Veltar manipulated the display to show human physiological data. Humans maintain what their scientists call fight or flight responses, rapid physiological changes that prepare the body for immediate physical action.
Most advanced species evolved past such crude mechanisms millennia ago.
Because they developed technology that made physical survival responses unnecessary, Marcus added, beginning to see where this was leading.
Precisely.
The Nexarians, for example, replaced most biological stress responses with cybernetic monitoring and enhancement systems. More efficient, more controlled, more predictable.
Until the cybernetics fail, Marcus said, thinking of the incident in the plaza.
Professor Veltar's compound eyes focused on him intently.
An astute observation. Advanced species trade biological redundancy for technological efficiency.
Usually this exchange provides significant advantages. But, it creates single points of failure, Zexhai said, clearly following the logic. If the technology fails, the biological backup systems are no longer available. While humans retained both, Marcus realized. We developed advanced technology without abandoning our biological survival mechanisms. Your species is quite unique in this regard, Professor Veltar confirmed.
Most civilizations undergo what we term evolutionary replacement. Technological systems gradually supplant biological functions until the biological capabilities atrophy.
The display shifted to show comparative data across multiple species.
The pattern was clear: as technological sophistication increased, biological adaptability typically decreased.
Humans appeared to be a significant outlier, maintaining high levels of both technological achievement and biological resilience. This has profound implications for survival scenarios, the professor continued. When Nexarians face technological failures, they often experience severe physiological distress as their biological systems attempt to compensate for missing cybernetic functions. Humans, conversely, can function effectively even when completely separated from technological support. After class, Marcus and Zexhai made their way to the Academy's impressive central library, a massive structure that housed the collected knowledge of dozens of civilizations. The building itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with sections designed for different species' access needs and environmental requirements. I'm beginning to understand your approach to the weapons demonstration, Zexhai said as they settled into a study alcove designed for mixed species groups. You weren't trying to prove that primitive weapons are better.
You were demonstrating human adaptability.
Partly, Marcus agreed, accessing the library's systems through his tablet.
But, there's another element to consider.
Which is? Marcus pulled up historical military data, focusing on conflict studies from across the galaxy.
Look at these patterns. In how many of these conflicts did technological superiority determine the outcome?
Zexhai studied the data, her crest feathers rising as she processed the information.
Less than 40%. That's surprisingly low. And, in how many cases did adaptability and resourcefulness play decisive roles? Over 70%.
She looked up from the display.
But, surely advanced weapons provide significant tactical advantages?
They do.
But, they're not the only factor, and, sometimes they're not even the most important factor. Marcus highlighted several specific conflicts.
The siege of Proxima Station, defending forces with primitive kinetic weapons held off attackers with plasma artillery for 6 months. The defenders adapted their tactics to exploit the plasma weapon's limitations.
Environmental factors? The station's location in a dense asteroid field created interference with plasma bolt coherence.
The attackers' superior weapons became less effective than simple projectile systems.
Zexhai examined the case study details.
The defenders also used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes that prevented the attackers from bringing their heavy weapons to bear effectively.
Exactly.
They adapted their strategy to neutralize their opponent's technological advantages. They spent the next hour reviewing similar conflicts where technological sophistication had been overcome by tactical innovation, environmental adaptation, or simple resourcefulness. The pattern was remarkably consistent across different species and time periods. "There's something else," Marcus said, accessing another set of historical records.
"Look at the post-conflict analysis data." "What am I looking for?" "Recovery times. How long did it take different civilizations to rebuild after major conflicts?"
Zexai compared the datasets, her feathers fluctuating as she worked through the calculations.
Species with higher technological dependence took significantly longer to recover.
Sometimes decades longer than those with more diversified technological bases. Because rebuilding advanced infrastructure requires advanced infrastructure, Marcus explained.
You can't manufacture plasma rifles without precision fabrication facilities.
You can't maintain those facilities without stable power grids and supply chains. But you can make a functional bow with basic tools and materials.
So human military philosophy emphasizes scalable solutions? Among other things.
We've learned that the most sophisticated weapon is useless if you can't maintain it, supply it, or adapt it to changing circumstances.
Their study session was interrupted by an announcement over the Academy's communication system.
All students were requested to report to their dormitory common areas for an important briefing.
The tone suggested urgency rather than routine information.
Marcus and Zexai made their way to the multi-species dormitory where they both lived, finding the common area filled with students from dozens of different worlds. The room's environmental controls worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric requirements, creating subtle zones of different temperature and gas mixture. Academy Commandant Torvash stood at the front of the room, his massive Gravian form requiring reinforced flooring to support his weight. Despite his intimidating appearance, standing nearly 8 feet tall and weighing close to half a ton, Torvash was known for his thoughtful leadership and tactical brilliance. "Students," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room without technological amplification.
"We have received a distress signal from the research station at Kepler 442b.
The station has lost contact with the Galactic Communication Network and is requesting immediate assistance." A holographic display activated, showing the stellar system in question. Kepler 442b was a frontier world, newly discovered and barely explored. The research station there was one of the most advanced facilities in that sector of space. The nearest military vessels are currently engaged in exercises in the Vega system and cannot be redirected for at least 2 weeks, Commandant Torvash continued.
However, the Academy's training vessel Perseus is available for immediate deployment. Excited murmurs filled the room as students realized the implications. The Perseus was a state-of-the-art exploration and training ship, designed to give advanced students real-world experience in space operations. "This will be a practical exercise in crisis response and adaptation," the Commandant announced. Volunteer participants will receive full mission credit toward their advanced tactical studies requirements. However, I must stress that this is not a simulation. Real lives may depend on your performance.
Marcus found himself raising his hand before he fully consciously decided to volunteer. Around the room, other students were doing the same, the Vorthan crystalline forms glittering as they signaled their participation, Zephyrian crests rising with excitement, even the usually cautious Aquari indicating their willingness to participate.
"Excellent response," Commandant Torvash noted with approval. "Mission briefing will begin in 1 hour.
Participants should prepare for extended deployment in unknown conditions.
Pack accordingly." As the briefing concluded and students began to disperse, Zexai approached Marcus with obvious excitement. "This is exactly the kind of practical experience we need. A real emergency response mission."
"Assuming it is just an emergency," Marcus replied thoughtfully.
"Research stations don't usually lose all communication simultaneously unless something significant has gone wrong. You think it's something more serious than equipment failure?"
Marcus considered the limited information they had been given. A frontier research station with advanced technology suddenly going dark with no explanation. The scenario had uncomfortable parallels to several case studies he had reviewed in his military history classes.
"I think we should prepare for multiple contingencies," he said finally.
"And pack accordingly."
"Meaning?" Marcus smiled slightly, thinking of his grandfather's advice about always having backup plans.
Meaning I'm bringing materials to make more than just bows. An hour later, the mission briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as 47 volunteer students from 17 different species gathered around the central holographic display.
Commander Salen, the Perseus's captain, stood beside Commandant Torvash as they outlined the situation in greater detail.
Kepler 442b research station was established 6 months ago to study the planet's unique electromagnetic phenomena, Commander Salen began. Her Altarian physiology was similar to Professor Zenthara's, with the same 4 arms and silver-scaled skin, but she carried herself with the distinctive bearing of a veteran space officer. The station's last transmission was received 72 hours ago, a routine status report indicating normal operations.
Since then, all communication has been lost.
Long-range scans show the station's power grid is still functional, but we're detecting no life signs or active communication systems. The holographic display zoomed in on the planet itself, revealing a world of swirling atmospheric storms and intense electromagnetic activity. The research station appeared as a small cluster of structures on the planet's surface, connected by enclosed walkways and surrounded by various scientific equipment. Kepler 442b presents several unique challenges, Commandant Torvash added. The planet's electromagnetic field is approximately 3 times stronger than galactic standard, which will interfere with many electronic systems. The atmospheric composition includes reactive compounds that can corrode standard materials. Marcus studied the environmental data carefully. High electromagnetic activity would definitely affect plasma weapons and most advanced electronic systems. The atmospheric chemistry would create additional problems for equipment maintenance and durability. Transportation to the surface will be via landing shuttles, Commander Salen continued. However, the electromagnetic interference means we'll have limited communication with the ship once you're deployed. You'll need to operate independently until extraction. An Exarian student raised one of his cybernetically enhanced arms.
Commander, what about our implanted systems? Will the electromagnetic field affect cybernetic functions? Commander Salen exchanged a meaningful look with Commandant Torvash. Possibly.
We recommend that students with significant cybernetic integration consider remaining aboard ship for coordination duties. Several Nexarian and enhanced Vorthan students immediately looked disappointed, but Marcus could see the tactical wisdom in the decision.
The same electromagnetic fields that would interfere with weapons systems could cause serious problems for cybernetic implants. Equipment recommendations, asked one of the Zephyrian students.
Standard exploration gear is available from ship stores, Commander Salen replied.
However, given the electromagnetic environment, I recommend focusing on equipment with minimal electronic components. Mechanical systems will be more reliable than electronic ones. Zexhai leaned over to Marcus.
Sounds like perfect conditions for primitive technology. Or appropriate technology, Marcus corrected with a slight smile. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from emergency medical procedures to sample collection protocols. Finally, Commander Salen dismissed the students to prepare for departure.
Deployment begins in 6 hours, she announced. Use the time wisely.
As students filed out to gather their equipment, Marcus remained behind to study the environmental data more carefully.
The electromagnetic readings were indeed severe, strong enough to interfere with most standard galactic technology.
But they also revealed patterns that suggested the interference wasn't random.
Something interesting?
Commandant Torvash's deep voice came from directly behind him. Marcus turned to find the massive Gravian studying the same data displays.
Possibly, sir.
The electromagnetic patterns don't look entirely natural.
Elaborate.
Marcus highlighted several data streams on the display. Natural electromagnetic fields usually show fractal patterns, irregular but mathematically predictable fluctuations. These readings show periodic variations that look almost structured. Commandant Torvash's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the subtle signs of increased attention.
What would cause structured electromagnetic patterns? Artificial generation. Or interference with natural fields by technological systems.
Marcus paused, considering the implications.
Sir, is it possible the research station discovered something that's affecting the planet's electromagnetic environment?
That's what we intend to find out, the Commandant replied gravely. Which is why I'm particularly interested in your participation, human student.
Sir?
Your demonstration in Professor Zenthara's class suggests your species has useful perspectives on operating in technologically challenging environments. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a test of how different species and technological approaches would perform under adverse conditions.
Understood, sir. I'll prepare accordingly.
The Perseus dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, its massive hull reflecting the orange glow of the distant star. Marcus stood in the observation deck alongside his fellow volunteers, watching through the reinforced transparisteel as the ship's sensors swept the system for signs of danger.
Electromagnetic readings are even stronger than predicted, announced Lieutenant Kexlara, the ship's Vorthan science officer.
Her crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies as she interfaced directly with the ship's sensor array.
Whatever is causing the interference has intensified since the last survey. Marcus studied the tactical displays surrounding the observation deck.
The readings were impressive and concerning electromagnetic field strength that would completely disable most standard galactic technology. Even the ship's own systems were showing strain from the interference. "How are our shuttles going to function in that environment?" asked Zexhai, her crest feathers flat against her head with worry. "The shuttles have been retrofitted with hardened systems and Faraday cage shielding," Lieutenant Kexlara replied. "They should be able to reach the surface, but once there, most electronic systems will be severely limited." Through the viewport, Kepler 442b grew larger as they approached. The planet was a striking sight, swirling atmospheric patterns that glowed with their own electromagnetic energy, creating auroras that danced across the entire visible hemisphere. It was beautiful and ominous in equal measure. "Landing party, report to Shuttle Bay 3, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. "Final equipment check in 30 minutes. Marcus gathered his carefully selected gear and made his way to the shuttle bay, joining the stream of students from multiple species. The bay itself was a marvel of engineering, large enough to house several shuttles while maintaining atmospheric integrity for different species' needs. The shuttles had indeed been modified for the mission. Extra shielding covered their hulls, and Marcus could see that most of the standard electronic systems had been replaced with mechanical alternatives. The navigation systems looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a state-of-the-art starship. "Attention landing party," Commander Salen's voice echoed across the shuttle bay. "Final briefing before deployment." The 47 volunteers gathered in front of the primary shuttle, their equipment arranged around them in neat piles. Marcus noticed the variety of approaches his classmates had taken. The Zephyrians had packed primarily high-tech scanning equipment, while the Aquari had focused on environmental suits and communication gear. Several species had brought weapons, though most were electronic systems that might not function on the planet's surface. "Your primary mission is to locate the research station personnel and determine what caused their communication blackout," Commander Salen began. "Secondary objectives include investigating the source of the electromagnetic interference and securing any critical research data." She gestured toward the modified shuttles. "Due to the electromagnetic environment, you'll have limited communication capability once on the surface. Emergency beacons have been distributed. They use quantum entanglement rather than radio waves, so they should function regardless of interference. However, each beacon has only one use, so save them for true emergencies." A Hive Collective representative clicked rapidly, their translator rendering it as, "Commander, what is our contingency plan if the shuttles cannot return to orbit?" "The Perseus will maintain position for 72 hours. If no contact is established by then, we'll withdraw to safe distance and request military support." Marcus felt the weight of that timeline. 72 hours to solve whatever had happened to an entire research station, in an environment hostile to most galactic technology, with limited communication and no guarantee of extraction. "Equipment inspection," announced Chief Engineer Mordak, a gruff Gravian whose massive form made even the spacious shuttle bay feel cramped. "Each team member must demonstrate that their equipment will function in high electromagnetic fields." The inspection process was revealing. Most electronic devices failed completely or showed severe malfunctions when exposed to the electromagnetic field simulators. Plasma weapons refused to achieve stable containment. Communication devices produced only static. Even basic scanners couldn't maintain coherent readings. When Chief Mordak reached Marcus, he examined the human's seemingly primitive equipment with professional interest. Mechanical compass, optical telescope, hand tools, rope and climbing gear, he read from his tablet. "And what appears to be archery equipment?" "Among other things, sir," Marcus replied.
I've also brought materials for constructing additional tools as needed. The chief engineer tested Marcus's compass against the electromagnetic simulator.
The mechanical device continued functioning normally, its needle pointing steadily toward magnetic north regardless of the interference.
The optical telescope showed similar immunity to electromagnetic effects.
Interesting approach, Mordak commented.
Your equipment shows zero degradation in hostile electromagnetic environments.
That's the idea, sir.
The inspection continued, revealing a troubling pattern. Nearly 70% of the equipment brought by other students would be severely compromised or completely non-functional on the planet's surface.
The few items that remained operational were primarily mechanical devices or passive systems.
This is worse than anticipated, Commander Salen admitted after reviewing the inspection results. Most of our standard protocols assume functional electronic systems.
Perhaps we should reconsider the mission parameters, suggested one of the Nexarian students whose cybernetic enhancements had shown serious interference effects.
Without proper equipment, we may be ineffective on the surface.
Marcus found himself speaking before he fully considered the implications.
Commander, with respect, I think we're approaching this from the wrong perspective.
All eyes turned to him, and Marcus realized he had just challenged the mission planning in front of the entire landing party.
Commander Salen's expression was unreadable, but she gestured for him to continue.
We're treating the electromagnetic interference as a limitation that prevents us from using our normal methods, Marcus said carefully.
But it's also an opportunity to use methods that other potential threats might not expect or prepare for.
Elaborate, the commander ordered. Marcus moved to the central display, which was showing the planet's electromagnetic readings. If this interference is being caused by whatever happened at the research station, then, whoever or whatever is responsible is probably prepared for standard galactic technology.
They'll expect plasma weapons, electronic sensors, communication systems that they can jam or intercept. And, your point?
They probably won't expect crossbows, mechanical tools, and optical reconnaissance. We can turn the electromagnetic interference into a tactical advantage by using methods that aren't affected by it.
Zexai stepped forward, her crest feathers rising with excitement. Marcus is right. If we can't rely on our usual technology, we need to adapt our entire approach. The research station went dark suddenly, added one of the Aquari students.
That suggests they were overwhelmed quickly, which implies they were facing something they weren't prepared for.
Commander Salen studied the group carefully. You're proposing to approach this as a potential hostile situation rather than a simple rescue mission?
I'm proposing we prepare for multiple contingencies, Marcus replied.
If it's just equipment failure, we can still help. If it's something more serious, we need to be ready.
The commander was silent for several long moments, clearly weighing the options. Around the shuttle bay, other students began speaking quietly among themselves, some agreeing with Marcus's assessment and others expressing concern about the mission's increasing complexity.
Very well, Commander Salen decided. We'll modify our approach.
Primary objective remains locating station personnel, but we'll treat this as a potentially hostile environment.
Chief Mordak, redistribute equipment to emphasize mechanical and passive systems. The next hour involved frantically reorganizing equipment loads.
Students with purely electronic gear traded with those who had brought mechanical alternatives. Marcus found himself in high demand as an advisor on low-tech solutions, helping his classmates understand how mechanical systems could replace their disabled electronics.
How do you navigate without a GPS system? Asked a frustrated Vorthan student.
Dead reckoning with compass and map, Marcus explained, showing the basic triangulation techniques.
It's slower but more reliable in this environment. What about target acquisition without electronic rangefinders?
Optical estimation with practice, or mechanical ranging devices.
Marcus demonstrated a simple range-finding technique using his hands and basic geometry. Your people actually used similar methods before developing crystal-based sensors.
The reorganization revealed an interesting truth about galactic technology. Most species had developed advanced systems without maintaining knowledge of the underlying principles. They knew how to operate plasma weapons but not how to aim without electronic targeting.
They understood communication theory but couldn't function without electronic networks.
This is sobering, Zexai commented as she struggled to learn basic map reading.
We become completely dependent on systems we don't really understand. Not completely, Marcus corrected. You understand the principles, you're just out of practice with manual implementation. That's different than not knowing. Finally, the modified landing party was ready for deployment. 3 shuttles would carry them to the surface, each equipped with backup mechanical systems and crewed by students whose skills complemented the challenging environment. Marcus found himself assigned as navigation specialist for Shuttle 2, responsible for guiding them to the research station using purely optical and mechanical methods. Remember, Commander Salen addressed the landing party one final time. 72-hour window. Regular check-ins using the quantum beacons if possible. Primary mission is personnel recovery, secondary is determining what happened. Do not take unnecessary risks. The shuttle launch was rougher than normal, with the electromagnetic interference causing minor system fluctuations even within the hardened vehicles. Marcus watched through the viewports as they descended through Kepler 442b's chaotic atmosphere, aurora effects crackling around the shuttle's hull. Electromagnetic readings are off the scale, reported the shuttle's pilot, a Altarian named Gensaka. I'm switching to manual flight controls. The landing approach required genuine piloting skill as automated systems failed one by one. Marcus found himself grudgingly impressed by Gensaka's ability to navigate using only optical references and mechanical instruments. It was a reminder that technical skills still mattered, even in an age of automated systems. They touched down approximately 2 kilometers from the research station, in a clearing that provided good concealment while maintaining visual contact with their objective. The other 2 shuttles landed nearby, their crews quickly establishing a defensive perimeter. Atmospheric readings are acceptable for most species, reported the mission's science team. Some irritating compounds, but nothing immediately dangerous with basic filtration. Marcus stepped off the shuttle and immediately felt the difference in the environment. The electromagnetic fields were so intense they created a subtle sensation on his skin, like standing near a powerful electrical generator. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy. Visual contact with the research station, called one of the scouts, a multi-eyed arachnid whose natural optical systems were unaffected by the electromagnetic interference. No obvious signs of damage, but also no signs of activity. Marcus unpacked his optical telescope and set it up on a stable mount fashioned from shuttle components. The magnification revealed the research station in detail, a cluster of modern structures connected by enclosed walkways, surrounded by various scientific instruments and communication arrays. Everything looked normal except for the complete absence of movement or activity. No visible damage, he reported to the mission commander, a senior student named Velkov whose arthropod physiology made him naturally suited for tactical coordination. But, I'm seeing something odd about the electromagnetic readings. What kind of odd? Marcus had been studying the aurora patterns during their descent, noting how the electromagnetic effects seemed to concentrate around certain areas. The interference isn't uniform across the region. There are areas of much higher intensity, and they seem to be centered on specific locations near the station. Artificial generation points? That's my assessment. Whatever is causing this isn't natural. The landing party organized into 3 teams for the approach to the research station. Team 1 would approach directly from the south, using the main access road. Team 2 would circle around to the east and approach through the equipment storage areas. Team 3, which included Marcus, would take the longest route but approach from the blind spot created by the station's communication array. Remember, mechanical weapons only, Velkov reminded everyone. Assume electronic warfare capabilities. Use the quantum beacons only for true emergencies. Marcus checked his gear one final time. His reconstructed bow, now improved with materials from the shuttle, could deliver both lethal and non-lethal projectiles depending on the situation. More importantly, he had spent the journey preparing additional tools, rope and pulley systems for climbing, mechanical traps for area denial, even basic explosive devices using chemical compounds from the ship's supplies. Ready, he reported to HFY, who had been assigned as his partner for the mission. She had adapted remarkably well to the low-tech approach, trading her plasma rifle for a mechanical crossbow and learning to use traditional navigation methods. Team 3 began their approach through the rocky terrain surrounding the research station. The electromagnetic effects grew stronger as they moved closer, creating visible distortions in the air and making metallic objects warm to the touch. This is definitely artificial, HFY whispered as they paused behind a large boulder formation. Natural electromagnetic fields don't create these kinds of coherent patterns. Marcus nodded, studying the station through his telescope. I'm seeing movement. Where? Main building, second floor. Window reflections suggest someone is moving around inside. Survivors?
Or whoever caused this situation.
Marcus adjusted the telescope's focus. The movement patterns looked deliberate, not like people in distress.
They were still 500 meters from the station when Marcus spotted the first real evidence of what had happened. A section of fencing around the station's perimeter had been cut, not damaged, cut with precision tools and folded back to create a concealed entry point. This wasn't an accident, he reported over the team's mechanical communication system, a network of mirrors and light signals that worked despite the electromagnetic interference.
Someone infiltrated the station.
The response came back through the signal network. Team 1 reports same finding.
Multiple entry points. Station appears to be under hostile occupation.
Marcus felt his combat instincts engaging, the result of millions of years of human evolution and thousands of years of military development. This was no longer a rescue mission, it was a tactical situation requiring careful planning and execution.
We need to gather intelligence before attempting contact, he signaled back. Recommend extended reconnaissance.
Team 3 spent the next 2 hours carefully observing the research station, documenting movement patterns and identifying potential threats. The picture that emerged was disturbing. The station was definitely occupied by unknown individuals who had clearly taken control of the facility and were using the research equipment for their own purposes. At least 12 hostiles, Marcus reported during a brief team meeting in a concealed position. They're using the research station's electromagnetic generators to create the interference field, probably to prevent communication with outside authorities.
Species identification, asked Velkoth over the signal network. Difficult to determine at this range. They're wearing environmental suits and staying mostly indoors.
But their movement patterns suggest they're familiar with galactic technology.
The tactical situation was complex.
The hostiles had positioned themselves in a well-defended facility with excellent fields of fire and technological advantages. They had effectively neutralized most galactic technology with their electromagnetic warfare, and they probably weren't expecting resistance from primitive weapons and tactics.
Recommend coordinated assault, Marcus signaled. Teams approach from multiple directions, use mechanical weapons to neutralize sentries, then advance to secure the facility. What about the research station personnel? Unknown.
No signs of them, but the hostiles wouldn't maintain occupation without reason.
They're probably alive and being held somewhere in the facility.
As the sun began to set over Kepler 442b, casting the landscape an eerie orange light that mixed with the electromagnetic auroras, Marcus prepared for what would likely be his first real combat experience. The primitive weapons and tactics he had demonstrated in Professor Zenthara's classroom were about to be tested in a life-or-death situation.
Ready?
Zexai asked, checking her mechanical crossbow one final time.
Ready,
Marcus confirmed, thinking of his grandfather's advice about being prepared for anything.
Let's show them what humans call appropriate technology.
The assault on the research station began with coordinated movement from 3 directions, the teams using hand signals and mirror communication to maintain tactical coordination without electronic systems. Marcus found himself drawing on military history lessons he had never expected to use, implementing small unit tactics that had been developed centuries ago but remained effective against opponents who relied on technological superiority. The electromagnetic interference that had disabled their advanced systems became their greatest asset, hiding their approach from electronic sensors and forcing their enemies to rely on visual detection alone. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Academy, Marcus felt like his species' long history of warfare might actually provide useful advantages in their new interstellar civilization. The first sentry fell silently, Marcus's arrow taking him in the shoulder and spinning him around before Zexai's crossbow bolt finished the job. The hostile collapsed behind the research station's outer equipment shed, his weapon clattering uselessly on the ground, a sophisticated plasma rifle that would have been devastating in normal circumstances but was now nothing more than expensive metal. One down, Marcus signaled through the mirror network, using the reflective communication system they had established during their approach. The response came back almost immediately. Teams 1 and 2 had also neutralized their assigned sentries without raising an alarm. Moving carefully through the shadows cast by the station's various buildings, Marcus and Zexai advanced toward their assigned entry point, a maintenance access that led directly into the lower level of the main research facility. The electromagnetic interference continued to intensify as they approached, creating visible distortions in the air and making their metal equipment uncomfortable to handle.
Whatever they're doing with the research equipment, they've turned it into a serious weapons system, Zexai whispered as they reached the maintenance door. The field strength here is beyond anything I've seen in the scientific literature. Marcus examined the door's locking mechanism while keeping watch for additional hostiles. The lock was electronic, of course, and completely non-functional due to the electromagnetic interference. But the hostiles had solved that problem by simply cutting through the doorframe with what looked like industrial cutting tools. They'd been here for a while, he observed, studying the precision of the cuts. This wasn't a hurried operation. They slipped through the damaged doorway into the research station's lower level, finding themselves in a maintenance corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, casting everything in harsh red shadows that made navigation challenging but provided excellent concealment. Life signs? Zexai asked, checking her mechanical detection equipment. Marcus listened carefully to the sounds of the building around them. Footsteps above us, multiple individuals. Voices, though I can't make out the words. No immediate threats on this level. They moved deeper into the facility, following building plans that Marcus had memorized during the mission briefing. The research station was designed around a central laboratory complex with supporting facilities arranged in a defensive pattern. If the original personnel were being held captive, they would most likely be in the secure areas near the main lab. The corridor ended at a stairwell that provided access to the upper levels. Marcus paused at the bottom, listening to the sounds from above. The voices were clearer now, definitely multiple species, speaking in galactic standard with the clipped precision of military professionals. Mercenaries, he whispered to Zexai. Not pirates or raiders. Professional soldiers. What's the difference? Mercenaries are organized, disciplined, and well-equipped. They're here for a specific purpose, not just random destruction. That means the research station personnel are probably alive, they're worth more as hostages or sources of information. Marcus began climbing the stairs carefully, testing each step to avoid creating noise. The building's design favored the defenders, limited access points, good sightlines, natural choke points that could be easily defended. But it also created opportunities for attackers who understood the principles of close-quarters combat. At the top of the stairs, a security door blocked access to the main level. Through the door's small window, Marcus could see into a corridor that led toward the central laboratory complex. Two hostiles stood guard at the far end, their attention focused outward toward the main entrances. Crossfire opportunity, Marcus noted, studying the tactical situation. If we can coordinate with the other teams. The mirror signal network allowed them to communicate with teams 1 and 2, confirming that all three groups were in position to assault the main level simultaneously. The plan was simple but effective: coordinated strikes to overwhelm the defenders' ability to respond and secure the facility before they could harm any hostages. Execute on my mark, came the signal from Team 1's leader. Marcus prepared his bow, selecting a broadhead arrow designed for maximum stopping power. Beside him, Zexai readied her crossbow, her breathing controlled and steady. Both had spent the journey to Kepler 442b practicing coordination drills, learning to work together despite their different species and technological backgrounds. Mark. The assault began with Marcus kicking open the security door while simultaneously drawing and releasing his arrow. The projectile struck the nearest hostile center mass, the mechanical broadhead punching through his environmental suit and spinning him around. Zexai's crossbow bolt took the second guard in the leg, dropping him to the ground where he writhed in pain but remained alive for questioning. Similar explosions of violence erupted throughout the facility as the other teams executed their coordinated attack. The hostiles had positioned themselves to defend against frontal assault through the main entrances, but they weren't prepared for multi-directional attack using weapons that function normally despite the electromagnetic interference. Research personnel located, came a signal from Team 2. Secure storage room, level 2. All alive but need medical attention. Marcus felt a surge of relief. The primary mission was accomplished, they had found the research station's crew and confirmed they were alive. Now the secondary objectives became important, determining what the hostiles had been trying to accomplish and securing any critical research data. Moving through the facility's corridors, Marcus and Zexai systematically cleared each room while maintaining communication with the other teams. The hostiles had been surprisingly few in number, only 15 individuals total, but they had been extremely well organized and equipped with sophisticated gear that would have made them nearly unstoppable under normal circumstances.
Main laboratory secured, Marcus reported as they entered the research station's central facility.
And I think I understand what they were after.
The laboratory was dominated by a massive electromagnetic field generator, clearly the source of the interference that had disabled most galactic technology across the region. But the generator had been modified extensively, with additional components that transformed it from a research instrument into what appeared to be a communications array of unprecedented power. They weren't trying to steal research data, HFY realized, studying the modified equipment. They were using the research station's equipment to build a super-powered communication system. Probably to contact allies or coordinate with other operations, Marcus agreed. The electromagnetic interference was just a side effect of overcharging the system. Further investigation revealed the full scope of the operation. The hostiles had been professional soldiers from the Syndicate, a criminal organization known for sophisticated technological crimes. They had captured the research station not for its scientific value but for its advanced electromagnetic equipment, which they had converted into a long-range communication array capable of penetrating most military encryption and detection systems. This was reconnaissance, Marcus concluded after examining the evidence. They were gathering intelligence on military positions and fleet movements across multiple star systems. The intelligence data they discovered was indeed extensive, detailed information about Galactic Defense Force deployments, trade route security protocols, and defensive positions around key systems. In the wrong hands, such information could enable devastating attacks on civilian targets. "We need to get this information to command immediately," HFY said, examining the data storage systems. "But, with the electromagnetic interference, our quantum beacons won't be able to transmit detailed data." Marcus studied the modified electromagnetic generator thoughtfully. Actually, they might. The Syndicate soldiers were using this equipment to enhance their own communications. If we can figure out how they did it. Working together, they reverse-engineered the modifications to the research station's equipment. The Syndicate had essentially created a signal amplifier that could boost quantum entanglement communications far beyond their normal range and bandwidth. With careful adjustments, the same system could be used to transmit their findings directly to the Perseus. "Brilliant," HFY said as Marcus explained his solution. "Use their own equipment against them." The transmission to the Perseus required nearly an hour to complete, during which Marcus and HFY worked with the other teams to secure the facility and provide medical care to the rescued research personnel. The station's crew had been held captive for 3 days but were in surprisingly good condition. The Syndicate soldiers had needed them alive to operate the research equipment. "Perseus acknowledges transmission," came the response through their modified communication array. "Military units are being dispatched to investigate other Syndicate operations based on your intelligence." Outstanding work. As the immediate crisis concluded, Marcus found himself reflecting on the mission's unexpected lessons. The electromagnetic interference that had initially seemed like such a severe limitation had actually provided the key advantages needed to overcome the Syndicate soldiers. Their reliance on advanced technology had made them vulnerable to primitive weapons and tactics. "You were right about appropriate technology," HFY said as they prepared the research station for evacuation. The Syndicate soldiers were completely unprepared for crossbows and mechanical weapons. "It's not about primitive versus advanced," Marcus replied. "It's about matching your tools to your circumstances." In this environment, mechanical weapons were simply more effective than energy weapons. The evacuation shuttles arrived 6 hours later, their crews amazed to find the mission completed successfully with minimal casualties. The rescued research personnel were quickly transported to medical facilities, while the captured Syndicate soldiers were secured for interrogation by military intelligence. "Exceptional performance," Commander Salen told the landing party during their debriefing aboard the Perseus. "Your adaptation to the challenging environment and successful completion of all mission objectives will be noted in your permanent records." But the real debrief came later, in Professor Zenthara's Advanced Warfare Tactics class, where the mission became a case study in technological adaptation and tactical flexibility. The Kepler 442b operation demonstrates several critical principles, Professor Zenthara explained to her assembled students, many of whom had participated in the mission. First, technological superiority is meaningless if your technology cannot function in the operational environment. The holographic display showed tactical analysis of the mission, highlighting how the electromagnetic interference had affected different weapon systems and strategic approaches. Second, adaptability trumps specialization in complex scenarios. The Syndicate forces were highly trained and well-equipped, but they had prepared for conventional opposition.
When faced with unconventional tactics, they could not adapt quickly enough.
Marcus found himself once again at the center of attention as Professor Zenthara used his approach as an example of tactical innovation.
But, this time, his classmates' attitudes were noticeably different.
The Vorthan students who had previously dismissed his primitive weapons now asked detailed questions about mechanical systems and backup planning.
Third, Professor Zenthara continued, understanding fundamental principles allows for improvisation and innovation.
Human student Marcus was able to reverse engineer and modify the syndicate's communication array because he understood the underlying physics, not just the operational procedures.
Professor, interrupted one of the Nexarian students, are you suggesting that our technological integration makes us less adaptable in crisis situations?
I'm suggesting that overdependence on any single approach creates vulnerabilities, Professor Zenthara replied carefully.
Whether that approach is technological, biological, or tactical.
The most successful military forces maintain multiple capabilities and can shift between them as circumstances require. The discussion that followed was unlike any previous class session Marcus had experienced. Students from dozens of species shared stories of how their civilizations had overcome technological challenges through innovation and adaptation. The Aquari described acoustic techniques that functioned in environments where electronics failed. The arthropods explained structural engineering principles that could create effective weapons from virtually any materials. What we're really discussing, Professor Zenthara concluded, is the concept of resilience.
How do we maintain operational effectiveness when our primary systems fail? How do we adapt to circumstances that our standard training hasn't prepared us for? Through redundancy and cross-training, suggested Zexhai, her crest feathers bright with excitement. Understanding multiple approaches to the same problems.
And, by maintaining connection to fundamental principles, Marcus added. Whether you're building a plasma rifle or a crossbow, you're still solving problems of energy storage, projectile acceleration, and target acquisition. After class, Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates eager to learn more about human approaches to technology and warfare. The Zephyrians wanted to understand how human forces maintained effectiveness without advanced support systems. The Vorthan were fascinated by the concept of mechanical backup systems for electronic processes. Your species' military history is clearly extensive, observed Professor Zenthara as the other students gradually dispersed. Have you considered advanced studies in military science? I've been thinking about it, Marcus admitted. But, I'm concerned about how other species might react to detailed study of human warfare methods.
Why?
Marcus chose his words carefully. Human military history is comprehensive. We've spent thousands of years developing ways to fight other humans, which means we've explored pretty much every possible approach to warfare. Some of those approaches might be disturbing to species that didn't undergo similar evolutionary pressures.
Professor Zenthara's four eyes studied him intently. You're referring to the psychological aspects of human warfare? Among other things.
Humans developed concepts like deception, psychological warfare, and asymmetric tactics specifically because we were fighting opponents with similar capabilities. Most galactic species achieved spaceflight without that level of military development.
Yet those same capabilities proved essential on Kepler 442b. Marcus nodded.
That's what concerns me. If human military approaches become widely studied, other species might begin adopting them. That could change the nature of galactic civilization in ways that might not be beneficial.
An interesting perspective, Professor Zenthara mused. You're concerned that human approaches to conflict might be contagious?
I'm concerned that our evolutionary background makes us naturally good at things that other species might be better off not learning. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the Academy's communication system.